Greetings, fellow men. Servus Männer. It is Red Pill Germany again. And I was in the US recently, and there I also saw the fuel prices, the gas prices. And while I was wondering again and being in shock of how low the gasoline prices are in the United States, I heard in the radio, I heard the news about recent events in France. I guess you all know that the French are doing what they like to do again, and that is rioting. And this time it is about the high fuel prices in France. Now in Germany, the fuel prices are actually just as high, and they have been going up recently. So before I left, in the middle of the year, let's say, we were still at around 1.4 euros per liter of regular gasoline, and now we're kind of at 1.6. So there was a noticeable increase, and I guess that in France it was more or less the same. I looked it up briefly, so if you look at European gasoline prices, Germany and France are pretty much equal there, around 1.6 or something euros per liter of gasoline. Of course, these things vary during the week or even according to the time of day and the region where you are, but these are averages, let's say. So you should know that the protests in France have been sparked by increased diesel prices, not gasoline, but diesel prices. And normally diesel is a little bit cheaper than gasoline because you have actually less carbon dioxide output for the same distance that you drive with a diesel car compared to a gasoline car. So in terms of global warming, or let's just say in terms of carbon dioxide emissions, a diesel car has much lower emissions than a gasoline car. But still, the French government imposed some kind of a CO2 tax on diesel, and this is what sparked these protests. And in the US, I saw that you have to pay the lowest one I saw is like $2.18 for 1 gallon of regular. That would mean a gallon is about 3.79 metric liters. So that would mean that you pay around 58 US cents for a metric liter, or roughly 50 euro cents, because 1 euro at the moment is, I think, 1.13 US dollars. So in other terms, at the moment, gas prices are 3 times as high in Germany and France when you compare it to the United States of America. Which is kind of understandable. I mean, here we have a lot of taxes on it, and in the United States, they don't want to tax gasoline so much because the distances between places where you have to go are much larger. Population density in many areas is much lower, so public transport, like in Europe with buses and trains, doesn't really make a lot of sense there. So in many places, a car is the only way to get places, and if you would increase the taxes too much, well, people just couldn't afford to go places anymore. So I understand that quite well. I just want to take the opportunity and compare the 3 countries, the United States, Germany, and France, when it comes to taxation and fuel prices, and also the mentality of the people. So first of all, as I have said, the fuel prices in France and Germany are almost the same. And also, I think the raw material, or actually the real market price of the gasoline, would be the same, because gasoline is a globally traded commodity or resource. And when you're a first world nation or an EU nation, and you have access to the same marketplace, to the same market price. So that would be the same, I think. And that means that the taxation would also be approximately the same. So I did some research for the US and for Germany when it comes to taxes. I didn't do that for France. I actually just assumed it would be the same because the price that you pay at the gas station in the end is the same. And I think France has access to the same markets as Germany does when it comes to raw oil or to mineral oil products in general. So why are French people losing their nerves right now? Why are they freaking out so much? Why are they rioting? Well, it's just a mentality thing is one thing. Germans never really riot. Germans are very good at just sitting back, staying at home and taking whatever the government throws at them. There is a huge reluctance in Germany to take to the streets and actually vent your anger a bit. Now, as all of you will know, I think, the French Republic was even born from a riot, from a violent uprising against the feudal lords or against the nobility. Bastille Day is one of those iconic events in French history. So I think the French elites can hardly condemn rioting or uprisings themselves, because this is actually how their republic was born in the first place. German mentality is quite different. So Germans' income is not really higher. Germany is not a much richer country as France. I mean, our industry is stronger, but the average people are not richer in Germany. Quite the opposite, actually. So Germans suffer just the same way from these high gas prices as France is, but we just don't do anything about it. And I will comment on that later, but don't think for a second that this is just about gas prices. It is not about gas prices, what we see in France right now. That is just the superficial level. It is about something entirely different. Now, people said now that the embargo or the trade ban on Iran, for example, that Donald Trump imposed is partially to blame, or that we had a big drought in the summer, so the ships that transport oil along our rivers had a hard time coming through, and this is why the prices are higher now. But these are just temporary small events. I mean, if you look at the big picture, this doesn't explain the high fuel prices here in the EU. No, we have to actually break it down. And as I said in the beginning, and as you can see from publicly available sources, it is, of course, the state that is taking all this money. So I actually tried to make a slide here, and I started from prices in euros per liter and gallons or dollars per gallons, and I transformed to a common unit that is satisfying for none of the involved nations. I converted everything to US dollars per liter. That is a unit combination that satisfies nobody, so I think it's very fair, just for comparison's sake. So as I said, when I was in the US, I saw regular prices of $2.18, and so I said $2.20 per gallon, and I calculated with a price of €1.55 per liter of gasoline for Germany or France. So if you actually do some research about what the state is actually taking out of the price that you pay, so how much taxes there are, in the US it's a little more difficult because it varies from state to state. So I took the federal tax and the state average, and in Germany I also I did some research on what the state actually imposes in terms of taxes here, and you saw then that in the US it's just a fraction. It's actually 12 US cents per liter only, whereas in Germany it is 2/3 of the price would be actually taxes. So you pay more taxes than the actual market price is for the gasoline that you get. So the market price, I think, is the real world price. That means the pumping of the natural oil, the mineral oil, then the transport, refining, the cracking down of the different carbohydrate chains, and then the actual finished product, the gasoline, and then transportation and storage, and then profit margins. Also, this is the real world price, and all the rest, which is actually 2/3 of the end price, goes to the state. Now, what does the state do with that money? If you look at the federal budget of the Federal Republic of Germany for 2019, you will see that the largest chunk is actually social stuff, work, and welfare. So of this largest part of the budget you see here, approximately 60% are pensions and retirement, and the rest, like 1/3 of that, is classical welfare. And I read articles that politicians are planning at the moment to increase the tax on oil or on gasoline in Germany, so that the price, instead of €1.55 per liter, would be around €2 per liter. That is insane. And you might ask yourself, why are they doing that? Well, of course, they say climate change and we need to reduce our carbon dioxide output. No. What they actually mean is they need more tax income because, as all of you guys know, millions of illegal migrants have entered Europe and they all get welfare. Someone has to pay for their brand sneakers, their brand clothes, their cigarettes, their alcohol, their accommodation, their food, their Medicare, all that stuff. And who do you think pays for that? Of course, people who go to work. As we all know, thugs don't pay any taxes. So it is, of course, mostly men that pay those taxes. Women are also mostly, at least in Germany, mostly employed in the public sector, and people who work in the public sector, by definition, don't contribute anything to the taxes. And the taxes will increase, and also, of course, they need more taxes on gasoline because they want to take taxes from wherever they can. And this brings me to the reasons for the riots in France. Well, why do you think the gasoline prices are so high? What do you think is the state they're doing? What is Emmanuel Macron doing with all this money? Well, he is giving it as tribute payments African and Middle Eastern people who would actually tear the place apart if they don't get their welfare every month. France actually has a lot more of those people. Maybe they didn't receive so many recently since 2015, like Germany, but they had them for a much longer time, since the 70s, from the Maghreb and from their former dependencies in Africa also. So they are in the situation now that they take the money from the working people, from the French people, and they give that to non-European foreigners. This is a large part in their budget, and it is actually the part that increased recently. And this is why new taxes or higher taxes are necessary to pay for all these new luxury guests. And this is just more evidence that Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron are not the president or the chancellor of the European people, of the French people, or of the German people. No, they are the presidents and the chancellors of the foreigner, of the illegal migrant, of the infiltrator, of the welfare tourist. And they are sucking our lifeblood like leeches, while we have to pay all these ever-increasing taxes, while we go to work 40, 50 hours a week, and it's still not enough in many cases to make ends meet or to provide for a healthy family. Meanwhile, these people who never worked here and who will never work here get everything they need provided by the state, by our taxes. Now, this is not the only reason, maybe. Of course, we have an aging society, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that millions and millions of people who have to be provided for in full, who never worked here, who will never work here, who don't even speak our language, who don't have the mental or cognitive capacity to do any meaningful work here, to provide anything of value to anybody in Europe, and you have to pay for them 24/7, that this will be a large chunk of the budget. I mean, it doesn't really take a genius to figure that out. Of course, these are gigantic costs. And guess what? These costs will not go away once our economy is taking a hit, and this will come very soon. A recession will come maybe next year, maybe in 2 years, but it will come. Probably sooner than later. And all these costs that we have now that are caused by these foreigners, will not go away. And if we stop giving them money, well, then you have a civil war. Congratulations. And it is quite fascinating, I think, that you see once again that politicians always take the path of least resistance, because they know that we European people, especially conservative European people, we are so well adapted, we are so polite, and we are so reluctant to actually take to the streets and do something and fight back. No, they would rather add to our tax bill until we cannot pay it anymore, rather than they would say, okay, you thought here, pay your taxes, or maybe we should not let any more new illegals in, or actually kick the ones out, at least those that our own courts have determined already that they have no right to be here. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them here. And we could actually deport them, but they would fight back. They play dirty. There are so many articles written about what they actually do to evade deportation. To get away with just staying here illegally. It is much more comfortable for our elites to just target their own folk, their own people, with water cannons, with chemical substances, and with militarized police. And that tells you everything you need to know about our globalistic overlords here. So instead of enforcing the laws and protecting our republic and our continent, they would actually rather fight a war against their own folk. So I just wanted to put these things into perspective, to provide you with some numbers. Of course, these prices, as I said, they vary, but these are order of magnitude estimates, or more or less a snapshot taken at November 2018. But I think one can see rather clearly that a US citizen or someone in the US is almost not paying any taxes for their gasoline, whereas we're in Europe, the largest contributor to the actual fuel price here is just taxes, and that's all it is. And this money is of course not used to fix the roads, no, it is used to pay for the costs of our new foreign guests. I hope you had a good weekend, catch you guys again later. Servus, Kameraden.